always from the heart of the city, and now on demand 24/7 on the CHFI website. This is the soundtrack to accompany a good book. And I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers around the world on the internet. Helen Hayes wrote, "From your parents you learn love and laughter, and how to put one foot before the other. But when books are opened, you discover that you have wings." I thought we might share a good book together this hour with Lovers and Other Strangers from CHFI.com. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Eva Avila meant to fly and John Mayer waiting on the world to change. This was from Catherine Romano, quoted by Ron Alexander in the New York Times. A commuter sitting on a subway train reading a paperback was so sprawled out in the seat that the woman next to him had very little room. When she asked if he could move a bit, he refused. At that, a man opposite them yelled, "Why don't you sit like a human being?" "What are you going to do if I don't?" came the reply. "Well, for one thing, I'll tell you how that book ends." Unquote. Have you ever wondered how a book would end and spend the entire night reading just so you'll know? Other books are written so well that we don't want them to end. You become so engrossed in the characters' lives that you know you'll miss them once the cover is closed. This hour, I thought we might take another look at books, both novels and great literature, and discover what you should be left with once the story has been read. Ernest Hemingway from Old Newsman writes, in the December 1934 issue of Esquire, said, "All good books are alike, in that they are truer if they had really happened. And after you are finished reading one, you will feel that all that happened to you. And afterwards, it all belongs to you, the good and the bad, the ecstasy, the remorse and sorrow, the people and the places, and how the weather was. If you can get so that you can give that to people, then you are a writer." Ernest Hemingway. Lovers and Other Strangers from CHFI.com. David Gateson bred with a diary, a book of another sort. Sheena Easton for Your Eyes Only, and the Beatles, wanting to be a paperback writer. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. If you're the parent of a student, then the books will soon be put away until September. But another kind of book is picked up in summer. From instructional books filled with math equations and grammar lessons to books that are filled with adventure. A whole new world that goes so well with a sunny afternoon on a beach or in a hammock strung between two trees. William Styron, from Writers at Work, first series published in 1958, wrote, "A great book should leave you with many experiences and slightly exhausted at the end. You live several lives while reading it." Louis L'Amour, from Education of a Wandering Man, published by Bantam, wrote, "It is often said that one has but one life to live, but that is nonsense. For one who reads, there is no limit to the number of lives that may be lived. For fiction, biography, and history offer an inexhaustible number of lives in many parts of the world, in all periods of time." Louis L'Amour, from Education of a Wandering Man, published by Bantam. Lovers and Other Strangers, from CHFI.com. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Desiree and You Gotta Be and Dan Fogelberg, Longer. Robertson Davies from The Enthusiasms of Robertson Davies wrote, "A truly great book should be read in youth, again in maturity, and once more in old age, as a fine building should be seen by morning light, at noon, and by moonlight." Unquote. I mentioned that there have been books that I've read more than once, and each time I've come away with something more from the experience. Clifton Fadiman from Any Number Can Play, published in 1957, wrote, "When you reread a classic, you do not see more in the book than you did before. You see more in you than there was before." And Italo Calvino from The Literature Machine, published in 1986, wrote, "A classic is a book that has never finished saying what it has to say." Lovers and Other Strangers from CHFI.com. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Peabo Bryson with Regina, Belle and A Whole New World, and Neil Diamond, I Am, I Said. Except for the names and a few other changes, the story's the same one. And an old fable that has a lesson still relevant. The frog who dreamed of one day being a king, and then became one. Washington Irving wrote, "The land of literature is a fairyland to those who view it at a distance. But like all other landscapes, the charm fades on a nearer approach, and thorns and briars become visible." Unquote. I'll bet there are characters you have met in a story you would like to meet in real life, given the chance. Characters who are so real that you can almost imagine the conversation you would have. Maybe that's why we like to see a movie actor's interpretation of one of our literary friends. Giuseppe Tomasini di Lampedusa wrote, "The gem of all the characters, needless to say, is Falstaff. Adorable rogue, man of fine and unconquerable spirit, peerless creation of the highest wit. Any one of us would give 10 years for the privilege of spending an hour with him." Unquote. It's true. Well-developed characters become immortal. Years, even centuries can pass, and the character is discovered again and again by new generations and lives. Frodo from Lord of the Rings, Tom Sawyer, and David Copperfield, for example. And there's a reason why. John Berger wrote, "When we read a story, we inhabit it." Lovers and Other Strangers from CHFI.com. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Celine Dion with Water from the Moon, Gladys Knight with The Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, and Gordon Lightfoot, If You Could Read My Mind, and a drugstore paperback. I was in a 24-hour grocery store late last night browsing through the paperback bestsellers, trying to figure out what will pique my interest and be my pick for summer reading this year. There are some intriguing romances on the shelves right now, even a few thrillers that got me to read the back covers for the plots. There's something mystical about books. The fact that you're reading the author's mind as you follow along with the printed word on the page. A book can transport you to anywhere, anytime. And if it's well written, you believe you're right there. It's almost a jarring sensation when you realize that your GO train stop is the next one, and you have to leave the story in mid-sentence. But there is something else. It was the author Erica Jong who wrote, "Books go out into the world, travel mysteriously from hand to hand, and somehow find their way to the people who need them at the time when they need them. Cosmic forces guide such passings along." Unquote. Goodness knows, I've been passed along a few books like that in my time. Lovers and Other Strangers from CHFI.com. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.